Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast episode. We have an amazing guest joining us today. Dana and I are super excited to welcome Hana Jacover, who has been a friend of UDG's for a long, long time. By way of introduction, Hana is joining us from Portland, Oregon. Thank you, Hana, for jumping on this morning.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I did a little excited dance to be on this morning. And like when I saw your email come through asking me to be a guest, I had to do a double take. And of course, I'm so honored.
And then she had her people call our people. So
yeah, we
it's
did the
starting to
deal.
feel that way, Hana, with all your speaking, right? Like soon you're going to be your high commodity to get on
we
there.
knew her when. We knew her when. So just a quick bio on Hana. So she has 10 plus years experience in advising in marketing, demand generation, marketing and sales operation, coaching, leadership, just an amazing resume of all the good things in B2B marketing. She is also an ICF certified coach focused on leadership development, which is really, the area that we're going to dive into and really learn from her today. She is specializing in co-creating authentic journeys, and that ties into, the UDG way of thinking. We're focused on authenticity when it comes to, marketing and communicating. So we'll definitely want to hit on that as well. And you were also a board member on Women in Revenue, and wanted to give a shout out to our lovely friends over at Women in Revenue, an amazing organization that is kicking ass and really helping women to grow in their careers. So welcome. So Hana is also a podcast host and a frequent speaker in the industry. We've seen your name pop up on invites for industry events, and you're focused on talking about leadership and authenticity and kind of some of the cool new things that you're experiencing in your role at Hype House. So can't wait to dive into that. But well, welcome, Hana. Super excited.
Yes.
So Dana, you want to kick it off? Let's dig in a little bit here.
Yes. So Hana, you have such an interesting path, I think, right? I mean, you started as a marketer doing what we're all doing today, and then you've moved into this coaching role. So we'd love to hear a little bit about that journey, how you got going with Hype House, maybe what were some of the reasons for the transition and the move towards this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I started as a marketer and I started agency side, which I think is not super typical for those going into marketing. But I think that was a really good foundation for me to really have that like zoomed out view of the landscape and organizations and how people moved and worked in organizations. So I do think that like that foundationally was a big part of me wanting to move into coaching. And then another foundational piece is that my parents are actually both executive coaches and organizational development explorers. And so that's just the environment that I grew up in. And whether I knew it or not, I think I absorbed a lot of their coaching mindset and have just taken that with me into every area of my life. And so, I was leading pretty early in my career, and I think a lot of that just came naturally to me. And I definitely think a big part of that was due to just the environment. Yeah. And so thinking about a little bit later in my career, well, actually, I mean, I want to back up because here we are sitting with the woman that like brought me into tech, really, and like she's my mentor and has been such an amazing friend. And she was my boss. I hate that word, but like, yeah, you were my boss.
I hate it too.
Yeah,
Such a hard ass too.
People think we're like a mom and daughter duo, or they used to.
It's true. It's true.
Oh
It's
my
true.
gosh.
I
Yeah.
love it.
But
Well,
Carrie and I, yeah, do you want to tell the story of how we
yeah,
met?
let's tell the story. Okay, so at the time I lived in Bend, Oregon, and my kids were. Middle school and elementary school. So, self-sufficient, but what I really needed help with was, kind of the after school stuff, getting them picked up from school, making sure everybody got home, got their homework done, kind of, getting everything ready for, moving into the evening of, all the other activities of a busy family. And I was looking for a nanny. And so I was looking on care.com, ran across Hana's profile. And at the very bottom, she had like a little link that said, switch to my marketing resume. And I popped over and I was like, wow, this woman is amazing. She's recent college graduate in marketing, has done some really cool internships. And I was like, I'm going to reach out to her and I'm going to see if maybe she could wear two hats and be our nanny part-time and work at the agency part-time. It's hilarious. And she was game for it, which I was a little surprised. And we both agreed it was going to be super awesome or a train wreck. And we would just have to wait and see. The nanny knows all the dirt. So
Totally. Oh yeah.
the nanny and the house cleaners know where the bodies are hidden. So that's how we met.
Yeah.
How long did you nanny for before you became full-time marketer with Cari?
Oh gosh, maybe was it like a year?
Yeah, I think
It was
so.
about we had conversations and it was like, okay, when do we want to, as soon as we knew that it was going well and that I was excited to be more involved at the agency, we sort of started talking about, okay, like how do we do this transition? And yeah, I think it was about a year and, Ruby was getting older and didn't, I think I was almost like a glorified chauffeur half the time, which was totally fine with me. But yeah, it's funny, like in hindsight, being where I am now as a mom, like I totally understand the need for help with transitions. And like Carrie had one thing that she was pretty hardcore about, and she's like, I just want the dishwasher emptied. Not a big ask. I just want the dishwasher emptied.
Oh.
And for a while, I'm like, okay, I'll do whatever you want. Like you're paying me. And I'm like, gosh, at home, I never have this problem, But I swear to God, now that I'm a mom, I am just like, can somebody just empty the fucking dishwasher? Like, that's all I
God, I
want.
feel the same way. It's the dishwasher.
So I
I
totally
love
get
that.
it. But yeah, I was really driven. I've always been very driven in terms of moving into tech, moving into marketing. That's just always been my dream. I did a lot of snowboard related internships and, sort of veered in a different path. But at the time, and this kind of weaves into our discussion, is I graduated in the middle of a recession. So it was sort of that moment of what do I do? I'm not getting the results that I want. And I like to think that this was kind of manifested for us, because I knew that there was going to be a solution. And I just put myself in an environment that I knew that I would be happy in, which was Bend. I knew that I could do the thing that I love to do, which was snowboard. And I would find a job. And I did. And it was literally like the kickstart of my career. And gosh, just like so grateful for our meeting.
Well, it's so funny because I do a lot of manifestation stuff and I listen. It's a path of least resistance, right? It just happened. Came when it's easy, it's right, is the thing I always try and remember. When it's difficult, that resistance, there's something there that's telling you that maybe this isn't the right path. So
yes. Oh my gosh, that's so true. And I think I started experiencing more of that resistance, you know, in the middle of my career, but I continued to push through. And I bounced around to a couple of other different agencies. And then like the resistance was so strong that I made the decision to go in-house and work in-house at a startup, which at the time I thought was the right thing for me. It was super fun. And I got to like really flex my muscle and showcase all of the skills that I had developed agency side and like really own a lot of that, which was exciting for me. But I think the resistance that I was experiencing was internal instead of
Yeah.
external. And so I had that moment where I just had to pause and say, what am I doing? And obviously there were other life circumstances happening around that moment that were sort of the catalyst to that. But it was an opportunity for me to really reset on, why am I here? What is my purpose? How am I tying my work to my purpose? Like, I don't want to be, and I watched my boss, I watched my VP of marketing move throughout her day, and I just said, I don't want her job. I don't want to do that. I don't want to pretend to care about appeasing board members and shareholders and investors. And like, I want to care about people. I want to help people. I want to make that impact one to one and let that move throughout teams. And so, yeah, I think it was a moment where I just sort of tied together my, like my roots, like where did I come from? And thinking about my parents and the values that they instilled in me and the experiences that I had in my career, both from being a very young person and being accelerated in my career pretty quickly into roles that, was doing some stuff that I had no business doing for sure. But oftentimes I would be the youngest in the room and I would get up and I would be presenting to, a room with 15 men, 10 years my senior, and they're looking at me like, who the hell are you talking about our revenue? So,
Fake it till you make it, we say,
Yeah.
right, Dana?
Yeah. You're the one who knows what's going on. They don't, right?
Yeah.
Story of
Yeah.
our lives as women for sure. So I think that's such a great transition into kind of, Hana, what we want to talk about today, which is really the generational collision. And we'll be real transparent here. We have 30s, 40s, and 50s all represented here from an age demographic.
Guess who is who?
Yeah. And I think that, we all have real different experiences from social and economic circumstances during our careers. I think that, often these gaps can cause these internal conflicts that we have. I mean, you talked about just an internal conflict of, am I on the right path? Is this what I want to be doing? And sometimes we're so sure that, yeah, I want to be the CMO or I want to be, the VP of marketing. And like you took a look at it and went, no, I don't. And so I think as women, on top of it, it adds another layer. So I think, how do you see women successfully navigating these differences? I think you gave such a good example of your experience, but in your conversations that you're having, what are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Yeah. I'm a big systems thinker, so I like to zoom out. I think we get a little wrapped up in the individualization of like whose fault and who's doing what incorrectly, and zoom out. I think we live in systems that are not built for us. I think we work in systems that are not built for us, and I think that all women need to recognize that and lean into the fact that we could talk about the patriarchy all day long, and it's a very serious thing. It's very real, and we will forever uphold these systems. We will forever uphold concepts like white supremacy, so long as the patriarchy is upheld. And we do things every single day as women to uphold the patriarchy. And I think that if we can step back from that and understand for each of us, like, what am I doing to uphold these systems that are so harmful, harmful to me, harmful to others, harmful to everybody, and really break that down, we can get there. I don't think it's just about like, let's hold hands and march forward. Like, we can't, like, these are big ass systems that were built for a reason that we're trying to break down. So it requires an understanding of what that actually looks like.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
So interesting. I think we want to dive in a little bit more and understand your perception on, I don't want to say like old leaders and young leaders, but let's just say that, and I'll put myself in the old category. The colleagues that are in my cohort, we're all talking about when are we going to be retiring, right? So that's the cohort that I'm in at this point. But I hated working for women when I was younger in my career because they were bitches, right? And, it was kind of this thing where it's like, I just can't work for another woman. And part of why I went out on my own, we were all just trying to, just to get ourselves recognized as being, authoritative and as being, somebody that knew what they were doing, right? And looking back, I understand why, right? I understand why we were doing that because, we were, as you said, we were talked over, we were ignored. Our opinion didn't matter because we were just young women. And, I recognize now that some of the bosses that I had in the early days, they were just trying to have their voice heard. And there was nobody talking about, how to be a better leader, how to be an authentic leader in that kind of environment. And I feel like, you're lucky, Hana, because these are conversations that people are talking about that, 30 years ago, we weren't. We were just suffering
not at
through.
all.
Yeah. And I am privileged to have the experience that I did. And because probably of your experience, Cari, right? You built the agency that I came into with that. I don't want to lead like that. I don't want to work for people like that, right? Like those were part of your beliefs and core values and based on your experience. And so I then got the privilege of experiencing you in a very different way, probably than you experience other women in leadership positions. So, and I think it's just like that domino effect, and we need that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's sad to me when we see it, because you still see it now a little bit, right? Women trying to get ahead and taking down other women to do so or not supporting other women. It's like, gosh, at this point in our careers, can we all just, with everybody, lift each other up? There's place and room for everybody to grow and all the ideas that flow. And, the idea of being threatened, especially from another woman, is always so frustrating to me because I'm like, especially when we see an older woman helping with a younger woman, it's like, help her out. Let's get her to where we didn't have those opportunities. And you still see it a little bit. And it's so frustrating to me when you see it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's that understanding of there's room for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's also our responsibility to, make the chairs, make the space, elongate the table, like whatever we need to do. But everyone sitting around is not your competition. You're not like, those people are not the ones that are blockading you from success. It is a much larger, bigger systemic thing.
Yes. So true. So I think this is a good, transition into the leadership discussion we want to have today. In your podcast, Hana, The Hype Within, you focus on this idea of authentic leadership journeys. So how do you talk and coach people on putting this into practice if you're a new leader versus a leader with many more years of experience?
Yeah, great question. And just as a precursor, the name of my company, Hype House Coaching, and the name of the podcast, The Hype Within, all have a meaning behind it. And it's really about developing inner hype and this idea of exploring what it means to be so confident in the knowing of who you are and what you bring to the table and your uniqueness. Instead of that external hype, because external hype fades. External hype is not real. So it is that fire within you that will get you where you want to be in your personal life as well as in your professional life. So that's really that the concept of the company and the podcast. But so to that point, I always like to think about where people are in terms of leading themselves, leading others, and leading an organization. And so often we see people thrown into these positions where they're leading others, but they don't even have this leading self thing figured out. And so I think it's assessing, where are you on that spectrum, and what compared to what your requirements are of your role, like what are you actually supposed to be doing, and where are the gaps in between. So if you're a newer manager, you probably need to do some more work on that leading self area, and going within and asking yourself questions, building the ability to self-reflect, building your emotional intelligence skills and all of that, versus if maybe you're on that leading others bucket and you have done some work in the leading self area, maybe it's about your leadership style and understanding, well, how am I leading? How are others perceiving this? How do I get people to do things that we need them to do? How do I build trust with others? So I think it's just assessing, where somebody is at. And typically the newer managers are going to either have skipped the leading self bucket and we need to go back, or, even more senior leaders have skipped that bucket too.
Yeah,
So it's
for
not
sure.
to say that it's like age related or seniority related, but I like to think of it that way.
It's so true. And as we see, in tech specifically, if you're good at your job, you get promoted to manager. And it's like, I mean, that's probably the perfect opportunity for you, right, Hana? Because, people getting promoted to manager doesn't necessarily mean they're good leaders. It means they're good at the tactical components of their job, right?
Yeah. And I think just if you don't cover that leading self bucket, there's so much that gets in the way. There's so much noise. There's so much ego that gets in the way because you haven't answered those questions for yourself. And I've been there. I've totally been there. Like we all learn from those experiences. There are times where I look back and I'm like, that was not the leader I wanted to be. And I know that I needed to work more on that leading self bucket. But it's like, how can we prepare people better? How can we make sure that that doesn't happen as often?
Right. I think it's so important because I agree with you. I don't think it's an age thing. I think it's really hard to self-reflect, right? And I think that the maturity of a leader is not based on age at all. It's based on this ability to look at yourself and know where you have to work and understand the emotions that are driving the reactions, right? And I think and I think that's what you're saying, Hana, right? Is at the end of the day, how we show up emotionally to these roles is I think often a direct reflection of how you're leading, right? I think if you're constantly in the worry and in this resistance, in this control area of leadership, then you're constantly leading in a way of deficit, right? Essentially, you're constantly, trying to play catch up, and you're ultimately not letting the person flourish underneath you, I think, in the way that they could. And you're never going to get to what you're trying to get to. You're never going to see the results because you're trying to control the outcome too much.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you project it out. And then that's how everyone around you operates. And I did a lot of work and education around just neuroscience. Like I'm so into neuroscience, and after going through a lot of like the emotional on my personal journey, like the emotional healing, I went directly to like, how does my brain work? How do these things work? How do these systems internally work? And what's driving what? And what are the chemicals? And that's a huge area that I think is so untapped when it comes to leadership, because just thinking about emotional regulation and what that means when you show up and you are emotionally regulated, like your nervous system is calm, you can then help calm the nervous systems, or at least like allow for that space for others to regulate. And then think of the opposite, which is the more, I think, traditional route, where it's like you're all riled up, your nervous system's out of whack. Half of the people I feel like don't tap into their nervous system and check in and say, am I regulated today? Or is my nervous system, do I need some work on my nervous system today?
It's funny you say that. I'm doing some work with a coach on this right now, and she specializes in that. And I think the one thing that she said in one of our sessions, which was so interesting to me, and maybe a lot of people know this or don't, but the emotion actually only lasts 90 seconds or something like that. And then it's the memories and the perception of what's going to happen, or basically our imagination takes over. And so that's what continues to drive this reaction that maybe essentially is not how we want to show up as a leader, that, after the emotion. And so, some of the tools and tactics that we work on are just it's just a way different way of looking at things, Hana. So I can see why you're so interested. It's fascinating. So
Oh yeah, I could talk about it all day.
Well, and Dana and I, as the agency has grown, we're really working on developing a new and different leadership style for us, right? Because we have an amazing team. We've got amazing leadership. We have all the pieces put in place. Now we just have to get out of their way, so that they can be successful. And that's not easy. It's a lot of the client relationships, started and belong with us, and letting all of those things go, I think, has been a growth opportunity for Dana and I to experience.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that almost goes to the point around trust too, like trust in leadership. And it goes both ways. Like as a leader, you have to trust your team. To let go, to step back. Like, you have to trust your team, and your team has to trust you. And I don't know that we spend enough time building trust. I think some people just naturally do that. Like Cari, I think you and I just naturally connect in that way. But I don't think that happens for a lot of people just organically. I think that it is actual effort to building psychological safety and going through the motions of building trust and building that relationship, which is hard.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, we think about how long it takes you to build trust just in a relationship outside of work, right? And friendships or, romantic relationships, all of those take time to build trust. And I think sometimes we think, if you think about how you interview someone, and Cari, you and I have talked about this before, you have a couple hours with them and your team, and then all of a sudden, and they do too, right? They're interviewing you, and you make this huge life decision, right? About where I'm going to spend the majority of my day and the majority of my week with these people. I mean, I see my work colleagues on Zoom more than I see my children. I mean, that's real, right? And so I think when you think about it that way, it's crazy that we expect, oh, you should just trust me now when you work for me. And think about how long it takes to build that outside of the work environment. And we think it's going to be different in work, but it's not, to your point, right, Hana?
Yeah, I've had so many sessions where like people come in and it's one issue around where they want to be going and, how they want to communicate that. But what we uncover is it's the foundation of building trust in a relationship with the people around that person never happened. And so we have to explore, like, what would it look like to reset with those relationships, and what are the things that you would need to do to make that happen. And it unlocks just a whole different path for some people, because they're not focused on that, like, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want. They're focused on building what's needed for them to go wherever, like whatever direction they're going. But like, they don't have the fuel right at that moment, and they need to kind of go back and refuel and think about that instead of moving forward to wherever they think they should be going.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think I could see where that could totally change kind of their perception of the role and what they're striving for. So
we are so lucky that Hana is out in the world
I know.
coaching people. This is this is amazing. You're doing amazing work.
Thank you.
I know one of your passion areas is DEI. So can you talk about, kind of, what you're passionate about and what you're seeing, in companies, that they're doing successfully, or maybe that they have areas for improvement on. And then kind of as part of, this conversation, are you seeing, there is a generational difference in how they adopt these types of initiatives, or, maybe embrace or not embrace?
Yeah. And I always say, like, I'm not a DEI expert. It's not my passion to go into that in terms of a role. But I have that lived experience, as a Black woman that also mixed with white, like I have a very different view on the world. I also have other layers of diversity in there. So I have all of these intersecting identities that have given me such vast life experiences that a lot of people that I talk to that don't have those experiences, like they have no idea what that's like. And that kind of also speaks to experience versus lived experience versus experience in terms of years, right? My level of maturity, I had to mature at a certain rate, at a certain age, because of the lived experiences that I have had as a human. And so I always think that, like, even just thinking about diversity and hiring people, like that point in itself is so important. Like, are you looking at seniority? Are you looking also at lived experiences and what this person has done in their life, what they have experienced in their life, and what lessons that has brought them, because that can bring a lot to the table too. And so, yeah, I think that, companies that are doing it right, I mean, first of all, it's still really bad. Like, I still think that when we look at the different layers of experiences or different layers of diversity, we're not seeing a whole lot of progress. I think we want to say that we are, but sadly we're not. When women are still getting paid far less than men. The amount of funding that goes to Black founders is still, oh my God, it's still, I think, like under 1%. It's disgusting. And then now we have this other layer of diversity that I think we're starting to think more about, right? Sexual orientation. We're thinking about neurodiversity. We're thinking about, disabilities, right? Like there's so many different layers to diversity. And I think that we also need to expand our thinking on that because, I'll hop onto LinkedIn and I see these women advocating for diversity, but what they're really talking about is there's no women in whatever you're doing. Like they're comparing men versus women when it's like, I want to hop in there and I want to also say, yes, and there's no Black women, there's no other women of color, there's no disabled women, there's no queer women, there's, there's just so many things. I think that can be really overwhelming to people because you are closest to your privilege, right? You're closest to your privilege. So that's the quote unquote oppression that you're going to call out. So I think expanding that, looking at the whole umbrella is a good thing to do. And I think companies that are doing that really well are recognizing those different groups of people and they're honoring their experiences, whether that's through ERGs or through company-wide initiatives where they're giving them the mic and giving them opportunities. But I think honestly, like, put your money where your mouth is, elevate those people in their roles. Look at the salaries across the board and look at the data, what's actually happening with diverse groups and underrepresented groups in your organizations, and how can you elevate those people into higher positions where they're getting paid more, they're getting paid what they're worth. I always was a big proponent of too, like tying diversity initiatives to comp, right? Like if you're an executive, especially if you're a white male, okay, put your money where your mouth is. Let's tie some diversity initiatives to your actual compensation.
Yeah. I love that.
That's
it's bold, but
well, I think we have a few minutes left, Cari. Should we try and debunk some leadership myths based on the generations before we?
Yes, let's do that. Let's do that. I was kind of thinking we could do who wore it better.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to throw a couple things at you, Hana, and I think a lot of these things are obvious. Let's talk about work-life balance. Let's talk about which generation, the millennials or the Gen Xers, tend to focus more on work-life balance and making that a priority in their work environment.
I totally think millennials, I mean, this one's hard because data shows that millennials and Gen Z are the most burnt out generation. And so I think that millennials, while they are more burnt out, I think that there's a lot of stigma around leaning into like, what does that balance look like?
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we're seeing is a lot of unlearning of that right now.
Mm.
And millennials being like, wait a second, I'm not doing this anymore. And so they're finally speaking up. They're finally figuring out what that looks like and how to talk about it. I think Gen Z is like, yeah, we're not doing that. We have these boundaries, and if you cross them, there's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right. Technology adoption. I know the answer to this because I played, what was the Atari was my video game that I played, or Pong.
Oh my God, we had a Commodore 64 that had a game on it that it was like.
I love that. I love that. So which generation is technically more savvy, more tech savvy?
Yeah, totally millennials.
Yeah. It's kind of obvious, although my husband would like to disagree, but I think that
Okay, so let me ask this because I've also heard that they're not necessarily more tech savvy, they are more tech dependent. So do you see a
Oh.
difference there, Hana?
Yeah, I guess we are more tech dependent, but that is just where this like our society is gone. Like I think everybody is now tech
Yeah.
dependent. I think that maybe growing up, right? There's an element of yes, growing up we were more tech dependent when we didn't maybe necessarily need to
Right.
be, but now we're at a point where it's like you kind of have to be tech dependent.
Yeah.
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 Do you guys have, well, probably not Maxon yet. Dana, maybe your kids. My kids, when I'm looking at my phone and I'm like, perplexed on what I need to do, they'll grab it from me and just do it.
So this is, I think, what's interesting with, I think why I asked the question is no, like Alec is 17. He needs technology in his life, but he doesn't know how to fix things always. I mean, he can figure things out faster, I think, differently. It's interesting. Like he'll still go to Tony for help on some tech things, or this isn't working, and maybe it's just an age thing. So we'll see. I think what's more interesting to me, because what would Alec be? What is he? He would be.
He's a Gen Z. Gen Z.
Gen Z. So the one thing that's crazy to me, Hana, with this is the amount of media going on at one time that they can absorb. So he has 2 monitors. He has Discord. He plays games. He's doing homework.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also texting friends. Like literally we are talking and I'm going, oh my gosh, my head hurts in your room because I don't know what you're doing right now. Like I don't know how you're functioning at this moment with all of this coming at you. And he's like, what? And I'm like, are you watching a YouTube video while you're playing a video game? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, huh. So I don't know. That piece of it is crazy to me. So.
Yeah, that part's kind of scary for sure. And my son, right, 5.5, like he will watch his iPad and sometimes he'll like have something on the TV and I choose one or the other. He's like, I'm watching them both. And but the
And
problem
he is.
and he is. And he's also, my son's also neurodivergent. And I do think like this actually goes back to that conversation where sometimes that sort of processing is helpful for people that are neurodivergent, but there's also a lot of data that supports that multitasking like that is so bad for your brain. Like it actually leads to like cognitive decline. It's so bad for you. So then moving into an environment like a work environment for these kids that do that, like how do you get them to think about monotasking and working on one thing? Are they going to be able to? I don't know. Are they going to be interested in the data that supports the fact that like they're literally getting dumber if they multitask like that? I don't know.
Well, and that leads to, I think I'd mentioned to you all prior to this call that I had sat in a session on Workforce 3.0 and they were talking about this Gen Z and millennials really needing this excitement. And like TikTok was the example, right? The video every few seconds. Carrie's new favorite social media platform.
I'm into TikTok now. It's terrible. It's such a time waste.
But because there's something new coming out all the time, right? There is this perception a little bit of this instant gratification. You're probably even seeing with your 5-year-old, like my younger two, like, Mom, we're listening in the car, play this song. And I'll be like, it's the radio. I can't play that song. And he's like, I mean, they just don't even understand. But the movement is so fast that they get bored easier in the job, right? And so it's about creating this excitement for them. But like as a leader, like where Cari and I are coming from, like I go, oh my gosh, how do we do it? Something doesn't change that fast. How do you keep it coming at them at the momentum? And to your point, is it even good to have that kind of momentum at the information in the multiple ways it's coming at you? I don't know. So
Yeah. Well, I think too, maybe that's part of why Gen Z does have those boundaries in place, because maybe work is just kind of like this constant,
yeah,
where in other areas of their life, they're going to get that. They're going to, create space to have more experiences, have all of that, excitement. And work is like what just over here, right? Work is
yeah,
over here. And the rest of my life is what's probably way more important to them. And that's where they are getting that. But I think also then it's thinking about, well, yes, everybody wants to get paid more, but Gen Z wants experiences. Millennials want experiences. And so how do you create meaningful experiences at work through
love
culture,
that.
through, challenging projects, through relationships? I think there's lots of ways to do it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
providing feedback and giving recognition, those types of things, definitely are a benefit. So, well, I think we could talk about this all day, guys.
know.
This is amazing. Hana, we're just so thrilled that you were able to join us.